from striking monuments like Maya Lin's Vietnam Veterans Memorial to indelible theater like Tony Kushner's Angels in America, we have always seen enduring art emerge from crisis. I recently spoke with Institute of Contemporary Art Director Jill Medvedow about that, how the museum is contending with the pandemic, and how the ICA isn't simply a museum anymore. Jill Medvedow, thank you so much for joining us.
It is very nice to see your face, even though we can't be together in person.
Well, we'll be together soon enough, I have no doubt. Well, just to start, if you could just bring me up to speed, all of us up to speed, on where it stands now in terms of when you think the ICA would reopen and what you're able to do for your employees at this time.
Well, I'll start with our employees, our staff, because they're our great asset. And right now, our employees are all are working remotely, and everyone is really hard at work keeping up with all the educational programs we do with teens and families. We're creating lots and lots of digital content for all of our audiences, and we are paying all of our full-time, part-time, and all of our scheduled hourly workers through the end of June, which is the end of our fiscal year, and working very hard to keep the staff intact. In a bigger picture, we're working with our sister museums here in Boston, the Isabella Stewart Gardner, the Museum of Fine Arts, as well as the List Visual Arts Center and the Harvard Art Museums, discussing the kind of protocols that all of our visitors can expect when they come to our museums when we reopen, whenever that is.
I know that you and some of your colleagues at institutions around in the Boston area sent a letter to our congressional delegation about the importance of more funding coming to arts institutions in particular. Do you have a sense that you're being heard from the government?
I guess I would respond to that by saying the plea for more money and for a greater public value placed on the arts is not a new plea. And it's something that we've all been talking about and for a long time. I think that, like so many things, this pandemic has brought into high relief some of the really infrastructure and systemic issues of our time. One of those is, of course, the vulnerability of the cultural sector, and I would say also the vulnerability of artists who typically are self-employed or part of the gig economy.
Unlike some other businesses, museums, the aquarium, which was also part of that letter, you just can't lock the door and walk away. You have, in the aquarium's case, animals that need to be taken care of.
That's right.
In your case, art that you have to make sure it's secure.
The Gardner has a living collection in their amazing horticulture, the zoo. So we do have a responsibility, not just to the present, but to the future. And over the next, I would say, 12 to 36 months, as we really look at what recovery and rebuilding and restoration looks like.
You've been leading the ICA for 22 years. And of course, like anybody else in this situation, this is nothing you've ever seen before. What has it done to you personally to have to see the museum closed like this?
I would say that the whole pandemic, which was so avoidable, is heartbreaking to me. It's a heartbreaking mess, and I recognize that I personally have not lost anybody in this virus, though those concentric circles come closer in and closer in to me, as well as I think to so many people. So I'm worried about our democracy and our elections.
I remember we spoke, I think, in the first week of essentially all of us being finding ourselves quarantined, and you talked to me something, it hadn't occurred to me until you raised it, about the art that emerges from crisis. And there's been very significant, very lasting art that has emerged.
Where I default to kind of immediately would be a painting like Guernica, and the power of that painting and the shift that it represented from any kind of glorification of war in terms of his history paintings about heroes and leaders to the trauma and chaos and devastation of war, or Goya and his disasters of war from the early 1800s. But it's also made me think how of art that has been part of my kind of the landmarks and the touchstones of my own career of thinking about the Vietnam War, or thinking of the art that came out of the AIDS era, whether it's Keith Haring or Felix Gonzalez Torres, to thinking about some of the monumental work we've seen, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, which takes individual loss and brings it into a collective monument, or the Vietnam War Memorial or the AIDS quilt. And then I think of, makes me think about many of the works in the ICA collection, and artists like Mona Hatoum, who talks about her Palestinian heritage and oppression. Kara Walker's monumental installation at the ICA about the antebellum South and the violence and sexual violence there. Steve Locke, who did a very extraordinary series of drawings about the murders of Black men. So we don't know what will come from this.
You kind of answered my question, which is going to be, is it too early to tell if that's being done now? But you have every confidence that will surface.
I don't know. I think right now, many of the artists I've talked to are not able to get into their studios, right? Because they are at home, or they're taking care of children or parents, or not able to travel to where they need to. So I don't know that it's being made right now. But what I do know is that in the time it takes for artists to do what they do best, to pay attention, right? To pay attention, and then to draw our attention to our world, to our interior and exterior worlds, we will see, and we will be able to take pleasure in the arts and in all it and they have to offer us.
I've learned what you're doing in East Boston, which is of course the site of the ICA's other museum now, other museum space, the Watershed. But you recognized a need there that wasn't necessarily being met.
Once everything got shut down and we understood the kind of scope of this crisis, we reached out to our community partners and heard loud and clear and consistently in all the conversations that there was a dire and a really very urgent need for fresh and healthy food. And so we moved quickly, really in the span of 2 days. We reached out to our fantastic ICA caterer, the Catered Affair, led by Holly Safford, who agreed to come forward and donate all of their labor to create boxes of produce and fresh milk and dairy products. With our community partners, we are now using the Watershed as a food distribution site to feed 400 families over the next month.
It's not simply the job of museums to just show art, as you're showing.
Well, you know me over the years, and I think the ICA was built, and my whole career has been built on exploring and demonstrating and deepening the connection between civic life and contemporary art. And this is one example where the arts are in service to our community.
Well, Jill Medvedow, it's always a great pleasure to see you and speak with you, even if it's remotely. Thank you so much.
Well, I will see you soon, and I look forward to that. Thanks for everything, Jared.